Hello, everyone. It's Carolyn Baker once again with my dear friend Andrew Harvey. And this morning we would like to continue our Elderspeak conversation. And this morning we're going to be talking about nobility of soul. That's a concept that we wrote about in Radical Regeneration. And I would like to begin with just telling you what it's not, and then giving one of the definitions that we gave in Radical Regeneration. First of all, the word nobility, it's very important to understand that that's not about class or privilege, as our Western culture has often defined it. It's a quality of soul that we're going to be talking about this morning. And everyone has nobility of soul. Michael Meade says that nobility of soul is the deepest essence or our deepest humanity. And this perception is way far away from all the hierarchical notions that nobility is synonymous with special or ordained or royal. We might also consider nobility of soul as the sacredness of our deepest essence. And all human beings carry this sacredness within themselves, from the person lying in the gutter who's homeless to someone who is walking in absolute royalty and everything in between. We all carry this sacredness within ourselves. And the question for each of us, especially in a time of potential extinction, is how do we live our nobility in the face of death, in the face of all the chaos that's happening around us, so that our lives can be as meaningful as possible. And so, Andrew, I'd love to hear from you on this.
I think nobility is the key to what we are being challenged to be and do. I think we're being invited, that's putting it very sweetly, we're being challenged at the ultimate, deepest level to grow into our nobility and act nobly, come what may. And why this is because what we're being asked to do is to hold two extremely noble opposites and to unite them. On the one hand, we have to be noble enough to look at what's going on without any magical thinking, without any denial, without any fantasy, and without any illusion. And that takes immense courage of spirit. And on the other hand, as radical regeneration has made clear, we are also being invited, challenged, demanded in a way to hold the other noblest possibility, which is that this whole global dark night situation, this whole terrifying extinction event that we are so obviously in, is also potentially the birth canal of the noblest imaginable understanding and vision and embodiment of ourselves, the divine human. Those two nobilities are now coming together in a vast global dark night that is also potentially a birthing of the new human. So, what's asked of all of us is to experience the nobility, the innate nobility of the soul, which all the great mystics have spoken about with such unspeakable awe and gratitude and passion and eloquence, and which anyone who's had any kind of authentic mystical experience will know. Because if you've ever been awoken to what lives in you, you know three things about it: that it's blissful, it's pure, it's exalted. And I love that word exalted, because exaltation and nobility are twin sisters. Once you've experienced that as your essence, as the essence of original blessing, the divine consciousness planted in you as a gift from God, then a part of you knows that the whole path is about serving that essence that you now know is inside you, in how you think, in how you feel, in how you act, in how you treat people, in how you treat animals, in how you celebrate and protect the creation, and in how you pledge yourself in a time like this, come what may, to do your utmost stringent and joyful best to celebrate that nobility in all you are and all you do.
Uh,
That to me is the key.
One of the things we wrote about in that chapter on nobility of soul is the fact that the Sufi mystics summon us to treat ourselves with nobility, and to recognize our souls and our bodies as shrines of the Godhead. They challenge us to treat all beings with dignity. And they also place a profound emphasis on how we treat animals, and to recognize the animal kingdom as a divine manifestation of innocence, beauty, and the power of God, and to revere animals for their own unique wisdom and natural nobility. You know,
I love
Walt
that.
Whitman, the great American poet, said, yeah, he wrote a wonderful poem on animals, and he said, animals do not whine about their condition, and he says that all creatures, all beings have their own kind of nobility. And in our culture, how much do we celebrate the people who radiate this divine dignity and kindness and integrity? We don't. People who speak with grace and tact. And really, in the second decade of the 21st century, we're very hard pressed to find leaders who adhere to the values of nobility of soul. And that is one of the things that I am very pleased about with Joe Biden, because he's really speaking and acting with nobility of soul. A noble man or woman is willing to suffer for what is right. Maybe it's verbal criticism, maybe it's even giving their lives. They're not martyrs, but they're under no illusion about what it costs to shift the course of history. And they're not afraid of whatever they have to endure in order to honor the truth of the vision that's entrusted to them.
And we've had those leaders in America, and thank God we have somebody who's doing his utmost best to model that. We
Yes,
had it in Lincoln.
yes,
Lincoln is noble.
absolutely.
That is the word that applies to him most deeply. And Walt Whitman celebrated that in his great
Right,
elegy to
right.
Whitman, to Lincoln. Roosevelt had the nobility to go outside all of the confines of his class and say, this is outrageous that people are suffering so much. We must bring in a new deal which honors the nobility and dignity of every single person. Churchill, who
Mhm.
is my
Oh,
special
yes.
favorite. I love Churchill because he's so crazy and so complicated and so dark in some ways and so light in other ways. He's a very rich human being. He's a Shakespearean human being. But without his nobility, Western civilization would have become a slave bitch of Nazism. Without the nobility of his stance and his capacity to radiate that nobility and awaken it in the British people at the moment when the British people were totally depleted and desolated by defeat, we would be all wearing jackboots at this moment.
Yes, yes. And I'd like to point to some other folks in more recent American history. Jimmy Carter was one of the best presidents we've ever had in terms of nobility of soul.
Yes,
And because of that, he wasn't that popular. You know, he
yes,
he
it's not a
really
popular virtue.
it's a very unpopular virtue. And of course, at that time, people wanted macho. They wanted, the John Wayne effect with Ronald Reagan. And so that's what they got. And then, to go back a little in history and bringing in a woman, Harriet Tubman.
Oh
Oh
my
my gosh,
God,
not
yes.
only did she free herself, but she dedicated the rest of her life to going back and freeing the slaves. And I think today of someone like Stacey Abrams and John Lewis and Martin Luther King Jr., who are incredible role models of nobility of soul.
this is essential for us at this moment, Carolyn. One of the things that I so dislike about the New Age is its completely ignoble vision of God and its completely ignoble vision of people.
Yes.
I'll never forget the moment sitting watching The Secret when it came out. And I was appalled, frightened, and disgusted. I was disgusted by two things. I was disgusted by the idea of God as a kind of heavenly ATM who is there merely to satisfy our ordinary egocentric desires. And I was disgusted by the image of the human in that, because it really portrayed us just as mercenary, materialistic beasts who just want Malibu mansions and Cuban houseboys and Maseratis and are on the path just to get more, not to become our deepest selves. And at that moment, I really thought I'm going to write to Elon Musk and say, I'd like to be your first person in that spaceship to Mars, because I thought when you have the whole culture celebrating this ignoble vision of God, of the path of the human, you're really close to the kind of desolate situation that Paul Levy describes so beautifully in his book, Dispelling Wetiko, which is one of the center points of our book, which is really a profound soul sickness that has lost the image of the noble divine in us and has capitulated to all our grossest appetites and our violent vices and refused to do the work to really incarnate what is best in us. And that's what we're calling people to do in our book. We're not saying this is easy. We're saying it's incredibly hard. We're saying it's incredibly hard to face the truth about our situation. You have to be noble to even begin to. We're saying it's incredibly hard to do the work to really discover your soul and embody it and be a sacred activist. And we're saying it's incredibly hard to go on the embodiment jaunt, to go into the transfiguration process. Is not easy. It demands that you recognize your extraordinary inner dignity and then sustain it by constant practice, by constant alignment with the majesty of who you really are and the majesty of what God is and the appalling and amazing majesty of this divine event that is extinction rebirth.
Yes.
My God, if you're not going to love and honor the word nobility and use it as the ultimate koan for yourself in a time like this, you might as well go out and lie under a friendly truck.
Well, nobility is essentially knowing that you can't change anything unless you're prepared to give your life to change it.
That's it.
And we never know. I think there are degrees of nobility on a continuum where we can live noble lives and live this nobility of our most human essence.
Well, I think,
and,
yes.
and may never be called to give our lives, but nobility, as we say in the book, is essentially knowing that you can't change anything unless you're prepared to give your life to change it. People
Absolutely.
know the difference between someone who's espousing a fine cause and one who's espousing, a fine cause, but is prepared to give everything for it. Let's be among the latter. And I'm not saying, this, it's very important to understand this isn't about hero worship
Oh
or
God,
hero
no.
worship. This is
No.
about you don't try to be a hero. You go with that nobility that is within you, no matter what it costs, if you possibly can. Let other people call you a hero or a loser or whatever they want to call you, but you know that you have lived your deepest integrity and what is absolutely right in the moment.
I think we do need heroes to align our truth with. And that's why I've spent so much time translating the great mystical poets like Rumi and Kabir and now Hadovich of Antwerp, because for me, they are giving us in their work unforgettable insights and inroads and paths to our nobility by flaming out with theirs. Jesus, whatever you think of Christianity, if you read the Gospels, you're just aghast at his fearlessness, at his endless standing up and telling truth to power, at his absolutely unstoppable gift of himself, at the dignity and beauty and sweetness and generosity that he poured out in everything that he was and everything that he did.
Yes.
And for those of us who love the Christ is the ultimate nobility, because prepared to give his life for the redemption of darkness, the redemption of evil, the redemption and transformation of suffering. That's ultimate nobility in action for those who love him, even if they're not Christians. I think that we need to have those extraordinary examples in our core to give us endless encouragement. Hadovich has this wonderful couple of lines. She says, love give you the grace to align yourself with what God's majesty demands. And we see that alignment with majesty that is nobility in the lives of the great prophets, in the life of the prophet, peace be upon him, in the life of Rumi, in the life of Kabir, in the life of Jesus, in the life of Ramakrishna, in the life of Gandhi, in the life of the Dalai Lama. And it's important to have those inner images, because when you're feeling depleted and slothful and cowardly and overwhelmed, just bringing one of those into your heart mind can really buck your spine up, can
Yes.
give you the sense, I will not fail my love for this being that has revealed so much to me about me and about the nature of my true nature.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, the word hero is often used in an egoic kind of way.
Right,
And
yes.
we have our sports heroes.
It's not about being Clint Eastwood, it's about being Jesus. It's about
Exactly.
being
And
your inner Rumi.
and we know, you and I both know, people in our lives who are living this nobility that is
Oh, yes.
jaw-dropping. Our friend Jill, who runs the Moondog Farm Animal Rescue. Our friend Lynn White in Australia, who's doing amazing things. And all of the people that we wrote about in our book, Saving Animals from Ourselves. And people such as, more currently, Dr. Fauci, standing up for the authority of science calmly in the chaos of the Trump administration, knowing that any minute he could lose his job, and speaking out as best he could. But a man who's been a role model and nobility of soul to the max since the HIV epidemic in the 80s. A man who for 50 years has lived nobility and service of saving lives.
And we have examples too in the great entertainers. I think Tina Turner is noble.
Yes.
I am a complete Tina Turner addict. I saw her 17 times. And of course, she's gorgeous and sexy and she has this fabulous voice. But when you're in her presence, this is a person who has risen like a phoenix from the ashes of her life. And when she sings and when she gives you that immense joy and passion that radiates from her, it comes from a noble being who wants you to really give yourself to life and to take all of it into your heart and to live it with the fullness of your being. So we have in the great pianists, for example, there is an amazing pianist called Sviatoslav Richter, who I've been listening to recently. He died at the beginning of this century, and he was very deeply strange and crazy, and the greatest pianist probably ever. But when you listen to him play Beethoven or Schubert, you know that this man has given himself wholly to the music, and he is trying with every means at his disposal to initiate you into the noble glory of what Beethoven is doing and what Schubert is doing. So that nobility is also around us. So
I'd like to mention also someone who's come to our attention more recently in a movie, Billie Holiday. In the
yes,
movie, The United States versus Billie Holiday, she refused to stop singing Strange Fruit, which was that wonderful song about lynching. And, she paid with her life psychologically. She was destroyed by the FBI, just continually investigating her because she would not give up this song. She sang it to her death.
I'm so glad you mentioned her, because for me, I have seen nobility in America most in the African American community. I have seen such extraordinary nobility in old Black women who have never given up loving and believing in justice and believing in universal love, despite all the appalling evidence of their lives. I have seen it in the young men that I coached who just come out of prison, who had discovered faith in prison after living sometimes very violent and tortured lives because of where they were born and what they were flung into. And I've seen unspeakable desire to become true lovers and warriors of God in them, and them drawing on the massive resources of their own tradition of gospel music,
Yes.
of jazz, of the great poetry of Langston Hughes, of the example of Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King and John Lewis. That nobility is very much alive in this extraordinary group of Black women who Stacey Abrams is part of, which are now rising very formidably to guide us through this derelict, shameful, shameless, disgusting period of American life. So it's a great paradox, isn't it? That in the most broken and depleted and denigrated is where you find that icons of nobility flashing most beautifully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not agree more. Well, as we go forward, we ask ourselves, how most nobly do we hold the possibility of transmutation and transformation as a species alongside the growing prospect of extinction? And, as we've written about and spoken about many times, the most noble thing we can do at this time is to do what we are called to do, face the darkness unflinchingly, and draw on the deepest discoveries of modern science and of mystical traditions to go forth and meet the potential extinction that we are facing with nobility, doing what needs to be done, and realizing it could cost us our lives even before extinction takes place. The great Angelus Silesius wrote, and this might be a way to finish our remarks right now: nobility is to be empty, open always to in-streaming God. And then Hadowich
My
said,
favorite.
she says, whatever ordeals for love's sake men lead me through, I pray to stand firm. I know from the nobility of my soul that in suffering for sublime love, I conquer.
You can't get better than that.
No, you certainly
I
cannot.
know from the nobility of my soul that suffering for sublime love,
Absolutely.
I conquer. That's it. That's the motto for our time. That's why I love her so.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been wonderful to be with you again.
Wonderful, my darling. God bless everybody listening to this.